What's good, everyone, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we're reacting to Deathbed Confessions, 2 Shocking Crimes. Now, I don't think I need to explain what this is all about, but for the sake of it, this is, as the title says, people that confess to a crime when they're on their deathbed. Honestly, I don't know why I try to find the right words for that. It's literally what I just said. The title of this video that I'm reacting to is literally all there is to need to say. So, yeah. This is a bit awkward. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy this reaction video. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Hit the notification button to be notified when a new video comes out. If there's any videos you'd like to recommend that I should react to, put it down in the comment section below and I'll react to it as soon as possible. The link to this video is going to be down in the description below, so be sure to give BMA some love and support for the video that they made that I'm reacting to. Other than that, let's get around to this video, shall we? Okay.
The lie behind the world's most famous photo, the truth revealing an infamous bank robber, and how daddy isn't your father. These are the most shocking crimes people confess to on their deathbeds, with each one crazier than the last. In the town of Linfield, Massachusetts, only child Ashley Randall was living a sweet little life with her mom and dad, Kathy and Thomas. Sadly, all good things must pass. And in March 2021, Thomas got sick with lung cancer. Exhausted after returning from a chemo session, he decided to tell Ashley something that would end up changing her life forever. His name wasn't Thomas Randall. It was actually Theodore Conrad, and he was one of America's most wanted criminals. Understandably, Ashley was gobsmacked. He begged her not to look up the name, but filled with questions, she headed straight to Google. After searching Ted Conrad missing, hundreds of articles about her father popped up, and none of them were good. Scrolling through, she learned that Theodore had been a 20-year-old teller working at the Society National Bank in Cleveland, Ohio. On July 11, 1969, inspired by his favorite film, The Thomas Crown Affair, he'd robbed the bank of $215,000, over $1.8 million today, and disappeared until now. After reading through all the articles and knowing that without a doubt this wanted felon was her dad, Ashley felt sick. Everything she thought she knew about him was a lie. Even her surname, Randall, was made up. And his chosen first name, Thomas, was probably a tribute to his favorite movie. To avoid recognition, he'd grown a beard and started wearing a hat out in public. In fact, when Ashley looked back, a lot of things started making sense. Whenever Kathy and Ashley had wanted to travel abroad, he'd always refused, claiming overseas travel made him uncomfortable. In reality, having a false identity meant he couldn't get a passport. Despite this, he was an active member of the community, regularly playing golf, donating to charities, and even volunteering on school trips. A few days after her father's confession, Ashley shared the shocking news with her mom, who was just as shaken. Even so, the pair reassured him that despite what he'd done, they still loved him and would support him through his illness. 2 months after revealing his true identity, Thomas, or Theodore, succumbed to the cancer. Kathy and Ashley decided they'd grieve their husband and father for a year before informing the authorities about his double life. But that November, U.S. Marshals appeared at the Randalls' door. Turns out, after Thomas had died, somebody had sent his obituary to an Ohio crime reporter with a note suggesting he was Theodore Conrad. The obituary listed Thomas's birth date as July 10th, 1947, the famous Theodore's, just 2 years older. It also mentioned Theodore's parents, just with Randall added to the end of their names. What's more, in 2014, Thomas filed for bankruptcy, and investigators found that his handwriting matched that of a college application he'd filled out in 1967 as Theodore. The writing was on the wall, and Kathy and Ashley admitted they'd known about it for months. Thankfully, no criminal charges were filed against them. All they had to do was come to terms with the troubling truth.
Okay, that I I don't know what to expect from that one. Because that honestly would be shocking. Though the stuff that was revealed, jeez, gotta feel bad for them. Because it's one reveal after another, all the crimes coming out, all secret stuff coming, one after another, and they never knew this stuff. They just knew the man that was their husband slash father, and and they were grieving for him more than coming to terms with that. So yeah, that must be I that must be pretty horrifying to know, because all this life you know this one person, and bam, this.
As we've seen, even parents aren't always the bastion of trust we'd like them to be. Take this anonymous post on BuzzFeed. Yes, that's still a thing, as case in point. The BuzzFeeder, who I'll call Ella, was visiting her grandmother in her hospital bed. Enigmatically claiming she had one last thing to do, Grandma suddenly told everyone apart from Ella's father to leave the room. Ella waited outside with the rest of her family, perplexed, for some time. Then, eventually, her dad burst out with tears in his eyes. See, before she'd passed, the dying woman had told him that as a child, he'd needed surgery. This surgery had meant he was incapable of having kids. She just didn't tell him for some reason. Only Ella's mother had given birth to several children. Oh, dear. In response to the devastating confession, the kids did paternity tests and proved it to be true. They weren't related to the man they'd known their whole lives as their biological father. Ella's mother had been cheating on him. Why the heck did you wait so long to tell him, Grandma? Moving on, we all know the iconic 80s song Love.
Okay, what the heck? Okay, for that one, you should have told them about this, because the math wasn't adding up, and all this and all that, and you decided to tell your. I would hate if that was the case.
Shack. Well, that rusty-roofed home might be more than just some fruity lyrics. Redditor Paper Hands McGee 213, great name, shared how their grandfather, when he was nearing the end of his life, admitted that Paper Hands' mother wasn't his only child, as everybody had thought she was. He said that long ago, in the 1950s, he'd done something in a cabin in the woods, though this was less horror movie and more teen drama. See, back then, Granddad's best friend wasn't able to have children, so he made a proposal to Granddad for him to impregnate his wife instead. Unable to refuse such an offer, Granddad agreed and traveled with his friend's wife to that cabin in the woods, buried away in the remote Ozarks. Then they got to work doing, This wasn't some one and done, though. They spent a whole week there. A whole week? I'd get a headache after one night. His friend even walked in on the pair when he went to check up on them. Man, I can't even imagine. The week of depravity worked, though, and the wife got pregnant. The husband, however, probably no longer able to look his best friend in the eye, swiftly moved out of the state with his pregnant wife to make a fresh start. The only communication Paper Hands' grandfather received from them afterwards was a letter confirming the child was born a healthy little girl. He never saw them again. Well, that's what you get from one-night stands, or, 1 week stands. There's nothing more innocent than a newborn baby, but unfortunately, there are
Okay, that just felt wrong. I feel icky. I feel icky hearing that now.
people out there who will take advantage of their vulnerability. Redditor O'Doyle321 shared a story about his wife, who worked as a carer in a nursing home. One of her patients was an elderly woman who dedicated her life to being a nurse in the 70s and 80s. What a great person, right? Well, after years of hard work, the woman became poorly. Laying on her deathbed and gasping her final breaths, she motioned the carer closer and softly whispered one haunting phrase. "When I was a nurse, I switched babies around."
What?
What? Imagine being the parent going home with the wrong baby. That's horrible. But there's more. Another story from the land of Reddit comes from
can't be serious.
Casline04, who shared the story of a woman who was born in China but later moved to Europe. Sometime after, back in China, the woman's mother was dying of terminal cancer, so her daughter flew back to be with her. Then, in her final days, the mother admitted something truly wild. She wasn't her biological mother. Unable to have children, her and her husband had made a desperate decision. They'd bought a baby from a child trafficking ring and raised it as their own. On hearing this distressing news, the woman was overcome with emotion, not because they weren't biologically related, but because of the immense pain her parents had endured in their struggle to have a child. Despite the dark origins of her story, though, the woman had been given the best life anyone could have asked for. The clincher? That woman was Casline04's own mother. Beginning in the 1st century...
Oh, that I don't know what to say about that last part, but at least she had a
when
good
the
childhood.
ancient Pict people of the Scottish Highlands made a carving of a strange beast with a long neck and flippers, the Loch Ness Monster has captured humanity's imagination for millennia. No image embodies Nessie more than this photo published by the London Daily Mail in 1934. Gynecologist R. Kenneth Wilson had sold it to them, leading it to become known as the surgeon's photo. Wilson claimed that he took the photo himself whilst visiting his friend Maurice Chambers. And this being the 1930s, who was going to question a self-respected doctor? However, not everyone was convinced. Jump ahead to 1994, and Loch Ness enthusiast Alistair Boyd discovered an article from 1975 by one Ian Wetherill. In it, Wetherill said that the photo was a hoax involving a man named Maurice Chambers, the same man Dr. Wilson said he'd visited in 1934. Most intriguing. Sadly, though, Wetherill had passed away by the time Boyd unearthed the evidence. So, Boyd decided to track down Wetherill's stepbrother instead, Christian Sperling. And not a moment too soon. At this point, Sperling was 93 and had only days to live. On meeting the eager investigator, Sperling decided to finally reveal the truth behind the surgeon's photograph. He recounted how his stepfather, Marmaduke Duke Wetherill, a big game hunter and all-around colorful character, roped him and Ian Wetherill, his son, into an odd scheme way back in '34. Duke had believed he'd found footprints of the legendary beast and ran to the Daily Mail with the story, only for them to reveal that they'd been made by a prankster with a stuffed hippo, leaving Duke the butt of the Mail's jokes. Seeking revenge against the newspaper, Duke convinced Sperling to build a model monster using a piece of plastic wood attached to a toy submarine. Duke and Ian then traveled to Loch Ness with the model, where they staged the infamous photo. To conceal his identity, Duke persuaded Dr. Wilson, through their mutual friend Chambers, to develop and sell the photo, hiding Duke's involvement entirely. Looks like Dr. Wilson dug himself into a hole, although I suppose he was a gynecologist. Hiram Calder was an...
That's actually pretty interesting. So that whole thing was basically a prank. The legendary Loch Ness Monster is a prank used basically as revenge. That's... wow. Never thought I'd see or hear about a prank going too far, in all honesty.
ordinary baker in early 1900s Orlando, Florida. A widower, he'd been married to a woman named Sarah, who'd sadly passed away in 1910. Despite his loss, Calder carried on earning a reputation as a hard-working member of the community. But tragedy struck on July 11th, 1914, when the 64-year-old fell gravely ill with pellagra, a nasty disease caused by a lack of the vitamin niacin. A doctor was urgently called, but when he arrived, Calder was already delirious. It was here, just before his death, that he revealed a startling truth. He'd been born a woman. The revelation shook Orlando. No one had ever second-guessed Calder's gender. People were desperate to know why he'd gone to such lengths to hide his identity. And while I can't know for sure, it seems that Calder was a trans man. Just to be clear, Hiram was not a criminal, but in the context of the early 20th century, he would have been seen as one. so it makes sense that he kept it a secret. Plus, as a man, Calder had access to privileges that were denied women at the time, like the right to vote, making him the first female-born voter in Florida. Seeing that death was near, maybe Calder thought he could finally tell someone without fear of repercussions. He didn't tell them the whole story, though, and that would be discovered much later. The basic gist is this. In January 1850, he was born in Maryland as Hannah Calder. As a teenager, he'd always been a tomboy, smoking and chewing tobacco, keeping his hair short, and, in time, feeling a romantic pull towards girls. By the time he was 25, Calder began to transition. A process he reportedly described simply as, "I felt I was becoming a man." While that doesn't give away much, he wouldn't have been able to go into more detail without getting vilified. Regardless, Hannah became Hiram. And on April 2nd, 1891 in Baltimore, Hiram married his beloved Sarah, and the pair moved to Orlando to live the rest of their lives. Aww. In 1986, 50-year-old African-American...
That's actually an interesting story, in all honesty. Would that change history? I think that would change history. Yeah, that would change history. For, well, some bit of history. Because that would mean a lot of things, because... Huh. That is really amazing to hear, in all honesty. Because that is, like, history changing in America.
American man Wayman Camille Jr. was 11 years into a 15-year sentence at the Sussex Correctional Institution in Georgetown, Delaware. He'd been accused of attacking 64-year-old white woman Alice Mock after being found drunk in her bed in 1975. Meanwhile, back in Middletown, where it had happened, Mock had grown seriously ill. By her bedside was her neighbor, Evelyn Burns. In her final moments, Mock decided to right a terrible wrong she'd committed years earlier. She told Burns that Camille had never actually attacked her. In truth, back in 1975, Camille was an alcoholic and Mock was his drinking buddy. She'd invited him into her apartment, got him blind drunk, and stole his money. But then, fearing he'd find out about the robbery, or that her racist landlord would discover she'd let a black man into her house, Mock called the authorities, claiming he was a violent thug. When the case went to court, Camille's record of drunkenness was against him. On the advice of his lawyer, he pled guilty for a reduced sentence. Racial prejudice played a huge role in this decision. It was a black man's word against a white woman's. Camille had been captured in Mock's lies. 11 long years later, Mock admitted to framing the innocent man and passed away soon after. Left alone with this shocking news, Burns was determined to prove Camille's innocence. She contacted the governor's office, the Department of Corrections, the Attorney General's office, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, among others. But no one seemed to listen. Finally, she had success in January of the following year, when her inquiries caught the attention of Marion Harris, a member of the prison committee. After interviewing Camille, Harris was moved and rallied hard for his freedom. It worked. By June, prosecutors dropped the charges. After 12 grueling years of false imprisonment, Camille was finally freed. Returning to his mother's home in Townsend, Camille beamed and, rather than being bitter about it, said, "I'm free and I feel wonderful." What a guy. During
Nice attitude. Should be looking for the future, not in the past. Though I will admit, that woman was what she did was fucked up. Like, what the hell? People back then were so... You get it? It's so irritating to hear how things were back then, when it came to certain subjects.
1970s Japan, the country was terrorized by the far-left militant group East Asia Anti-Japan Armed Front. Originally made up of students who'd met at the Hosei University, the group was fervently anti-Japanese and anti-imperialist, targeting corporations across the country. On August 30th, 1974, they infamously attacked the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries HQ, taking 8 lives and injuring more than 360 people. After this devastating event, many members were arrested and sentenced to death, forcing the group to disband. Yet one member, 20-something student Satoshi Kirishima, eluded the authorities and became one of the country's most wanted criminals. The following year, in April 1975, Satoshi was accused of setting off a homemade bomb in Tokyo's Ginza neighborhood. The explosion damaged the building, but thankfully no one was injured. Subsequently, posters for his arrest were pasted all along street walls, but he was never found. Nearly 50 years passed, and Satoshi was all but assumed dead or long gone. Then, in January 2024, a 70-year-old construction worker called Hiroshi Uchida admitted himself into a hospital near Tokyo. He was dying of stomach cancer and quickly given a bed. Though this wasn't any ordinary 70-year-old construction worker. With his end approaching, he told the staff, "I want to meet my death with my real name." And he told them, you guessed it, he was actually Kirishima. His aged face was different to the long-haired student from all those years ago, but the resemblance was unmistakable. He told them how he'd worked for a building firm in Fujisawa, a city south of Tokyo, making sure he was always paid in cash and avoiding paper trails where he could. He had no driving license, cell phone, or health insurance, and paid for his treatment in full all by himself. He lived a quiet life since the 70s, only occasionally going out to drink, then coming home and playing guitar in his room. Rarely did he talk about himself when he did go out. Living like this, Kirishima had reevaluated his actions and come to regret them. Now that his confession was finally out in the open, he took his last breath. In the following month, DNA tests confirmed that he'd been telling the truth. But for those whose friends and family were victims of the front's actions, this confession came far too late. Would you have been able to forgive what Kirishima did? It's a tough question, but if you can answer it, let me know.
In truth, I don't think so. That is such a difficult question to answer. In truth, I don't think I could forgive the man if I was one of the people related to a victim from his actions. I would be annoyed and infuriated, but in truth, that would be it. I mean, I don't think I could forgive the man or forget what he did. I'm not going to accept any apology he said, but with the fact that he's dead, if I was put in that situation, that would be it. It would just be a bitter thing knowing that he got away scot-free of his actions. But other than that, I wouldn't go after anything else involving that. I wouldn't do what some people would do, like finding relatives of his and make them pay for the consequences of his actions or anything like that. Drew, he's just the guy that did it. And that would be it. In truth, maybe I would just avoid the area he was living in for the past 50 years. I guess. But other than that, that'd probably be it. If I was hypothetically in this situation, at least. I don't know. Tell me what you would do in this situation if you have some relation, if you had a relation with a victim of this incident. Hypothetically speaking, that is. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinion on the matter.
April 11th, 1967. Police arriving at High's Ice Cream Parlor, Staunton, Virginia, were confronted with a horrifying scene. Led by Detective
What?
David Bocock, they stood aghast at the sight of two teenage employees who had lost their lives. Their
What?
names were Constance Smoots Heavener and Carolyn Perry. $138 was also missing from the cash register,
Is that a real
leading
name?
cops to believe
The
this
first
was a
one?
deadly robbery. As the investigation got underway, a witness, William Thomas, reported seeing two people running from the scene. Little did Thomas know that his attempt to be a helpful citizen would make him a prime suspect. He was tried in court and acquitted, but suspicion would linger over him for the rest of his life. The real killer, meanwhile, was still on the loose. However, one witness, Joyce Bradshaw, came forward with an account that should have blown the lid off the whole thing. She came to Detective Bocock and told him that she'd gone out for a hamburger with 19-year-old Diane Crawford Smith 2 weeks before the awful incident. When they were in the car, Smith had suddenly pulled out a gun from her glove compartment, saying one bullet was for her abusive stepfather and the other for the Heavener girl. That's not just suspicious, it's downright damning. But days after Bradshaw reported the incident, the detective returned with the news that Smith had passed a polygraph test and bullets from the crime scene didn't match the gun. Then, oddly, Bocock reminded her that Smith was a good shot. Bradshaw took this as a thinly veiled threat and said no more on the matter. That's pretty strange behavior for a detective, don't you think? In June 2008, 41 years later, Bradshaw bumped into one of the victim's relatives at a yard sale. It made her remember that peculiar encounter she'd had with Smith, and she once again shared her story with the police. This time, they listened, though Bradshaw's testimony once again didn't bring the culprit to justice. No, she'd do that herself. By this point, Smith was 61 and terminally ill, staying in a health and rehabilitation center. Friends and family were visiting her round the clock and discussing concepts like forgiveness and redemption, which must have pricked Smith's conscience. On September 10th, police received an anonymous tip-off that Smith had admitted to the crime. And on November 28th, Smith confessed in a formal interview, finally revealing the story she'd been hiding for over 40 years. In 1967, Smith, still a teenager, had been working at the same ice cream store as her future victims, Heavener and Perry. The thing is, Smith was gay, and in the 1960s, this was a major taboo.
That reason.
Girls had viciously teased her at work to the point that, in her words, she was pushed too far. On April 11th, Smith walked into the back room of the parlor with a .25 caliber pistol. She didn't miss. Then, she stole the $138 and fled. But that wasn't the only secret Smith told. According to her, the reason she got away with it was thanks to none other than Detective Bocock, the very man leading the case. After committing the grisly deed, Smith claimed the detective helped her bury the weapon. While we don't know the particulars of Bocock and Smith's relationship, we do know that she practiced shooting on his farm. Though why he'd helped Smith remains a mystery, and one we may never solve. Bocock passed away before Smith's confession. Once her story was finished, the ailing 61-year-old was arrested, but she passed too before the case went to trial. What a twisted tale. At least her confession finally absolved poor Thomas, even if it did take 40 years. It was November 12th.
How strange. Okay. So, yeah. I think the 70s were when a matter of same-gender relationships were more common and people were fighting for it, I think.
2004.
At least that's what I think I remember. And I'm using those words because technically there is like two ways of saying it, like two words to actually say it, and I don't know. Let's just say I met some people that talked about using certain words and how messed up it is, and how I shouldn't be using said words to describe people when in fact are they represent different gender type of people, like all that. Anyone ever dealt with that to the point that it just you get annoyed from it all and you subconsciously actually note it down and tend to actually follow by that? It's weird.
In Massachusetts, and 54-year-old Geraldine Jerry Kelly was terminally ill with cancer. In her younger years, she'd run a motel in California with her husband John and had a mean reputation. Her skin was covered in tattoos, she kept vicious dogs as pets, and she even owned a boa constrictor. But now, her motel, her husband, and her pets were all gone. With what little strength she had left, she beckoned her adult daughter, who she'd barely spoken to since she was a teenager, over to her, and she confessed to a terrible secret. Sometime in 1991 or 92, Jerry and John had been squabbling, as they often did. But this time it was different. According to Jerry, John had been drinking and gotten violent to the point she just couldn't stand it anymore. Snapping, she'd taken out a firearm and, well, you can guess the rest. At the time, the family had been living in California, and she'd told her children and neighbors that John had been tragically hit by a car. Jerry's daughter, who believed this lie most of her life, recoiled in shock, but her mother wasn't done. She finished her story with the appropriately chilling line, "Check the freezer." Safe to say, her daughter reported her to the police, who managed to track down an unplugged freezer at Somerville storage facility that belonged to her. Strangely, the grubby container was locked tight and sealed with duct tape. As they got closer, investigators gagged at the foul stink the thing emitted. Nevertheless, they removed the tape and wrenched open the freezer to see an absolutely horrific sight. 13 years before, after the terrible deed was done, Jerry had clearly stuffed the, evidence inside. Then she'd sealed it shut, rented a storage unit, and kept it there until 1998 when she moved to Massachusetts. Jerry had her sordid secret shipped along with her, but as she lay on her deathbed, clearly the weight of her actions had become too much to bear. Ooh, I'm not sleeping tonight. Not all crimes involve...
That's horrifying. The guy didn't even get a proper burial. And he was betrayed by his wife, and she just. That's horrifying. Oh. I'm a bit sad for the guy because he never truly got a proper burial. That's the thing with me. I feel like a proper burial is needed for things, and I don't like the fact that that is a method of what people do to someone. It's just
theft or homicide.
To me.
Some are even more diabolical. Take this tale from Redditor Orange Star, who shared a story about her grandpa, a proud Sicilian with impeccable cooking skills.
No.
He regularly wowed guests with his sublime cuisine, earning endless praise for his legendary meatballs. But on his deathbed, the truth came out. His meatballs were, just frozen ones from the grocery store.
That's it?
That's truly despicable. Another food-related confession.
That's not bad, actually. That's just... Yeah. It just makes it sound... You were just trying... That doesn't sound bad. No,
Comes from epic boy Chold, who shared an insane story about his great aunt who was slipping in and out of consciousness while lying in her hospital bed. Delirious, she started spouting strange remarks that got more and more frantic. At first, Chold could only make out 2 words that she kept repeating: boy and ingredient. Then she called Chold over to her side, eyes bulging widely as she desperately tried to explain something, and slowly, surely, Chold managed to piece it together. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. It turns out his aunt had specialized in a very particular method of cooking. She would boil eggs in the urine of a stable boy, then serve them to her family without telling them how they were cooked. What?
What? Oh god. Ugh. What? Why?
No, you heard. She deliriously insisted
What
that the boy was
the?
well compensated, as if that makes it okay. But guess what? The meal is a real thing with a real name called virgin boy eggs. Yeah, it originates from Dongyang, China, where to
The
this day
fuck?
it's still a specialty. Essentially, the eggs are boiled and cured in the pee of a boy under the age of 10 until the whites turn a custardy color and the yolks go green. Ugh. The delicacy is believed to have health benefits and is sold by vendors throughout city streets who claim it's peelicious. Yeah, no thanks. If you ask me, that
Ew.
ant was a bad egg.
No.
Well,
No. 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 That is. That is disgusting. Ugh. The other one wasn't bad about the meatballs. Like you, like what place doesn't have that kind of thing? But the one messed up one is the one involving the freezer, cause that one just ticks me off. That one just ticks me off. Innocent man doesn't get proper burial. That just ticks me off. Like you don't believe. Ugh. Anyway, which one of these was the most shocking to you? Honestly, the the freezer one is by far the most shocking in my personal opinion because that is messed up. Ugh. So tell me what you think in the comment section below. Hit the notification button to be notified immediately when a new video comes out. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll be sure to see you all in the next one. Again, tell me what you think. Which one is the most shocking to you in the comment section below. And yeah, until next time, everyone. Bye.